Hello there. Today I'm looking at a high quality white wine from the south of France. Mas de Daumas Gassac is an estate that has an understandable reputation for making quality wine. Starting back in 1970, the late Aimé Guibert and his wife Véronique and family bought a house in the Gassac Valley, the Mas de Daumas, and set about renovating both house and estate. And without any previous viticultural experience, they settled on the idea of creating a world-class wine estate in this remote valley. With the help of many eminent collaborators, for instance the soil scientist Henri Enjalbert and the winemaker Emile Peynaud, by 1978 they produced their first vintage of a Cabernet Sauvignon based red, which has gone on to earn the sobriquet the Lafite of the Languedoc. So they really were visionaries, because at the time this was a region that just produced everyday table wine. So having been successful with their reds, in 1983 they started planting vines to produce a white wine. And the white wine of Mas de Daumas Gassac, I feel, is quite idiosyncratic. It's quite an individualistic wine. I don't see this style of wine being made by many other people, and I think it's a fantastic wine actually. So the first vintage was launched in 1986. It was predominantly Viognier, there was some Chardonnay, and the balance was Muscat, Blanc et Petit Grain. The blend has changed substantially. It is still predominantly Viognier, but it now includes, as well as the Chardonnay, Chenin Blanc, Petit Menceng, and then they have an array of what they refer to as rare varietals. So there's Viano, there's Gros Menceng, there's Semillon, there's Muscat d'Alexandria, there's Petit Corbu, and there's both Marsanne and Roussanne. So you have a wine that's a sort of a confluence of grape varieties from the Rhône, from Burgundy, from Bordeaux, from southwest France, and even from Italy, all coming together in this one unique location. So the wine is labelled as an IGP for St Guilhem-le-Désert, but the estate here in the Gassac Valley has its own unique nature. Not only are the soils suitable for the growing of quality wine, being iron-rich, fractured limestone soils at the bottom of the estate, and more pure limestone at the top where the white wines tend to be grown. But this estate, whose vineyards reach up to about, I think, 250-300 metres above sea level, has a wonderful cooling effect. The valley of the Gassac channels cooling winds of an evening through it, and actually almost makes this a site for cool climate viticulture in an area that has a relatively warm Mediterranean climate. And that gives a lovely finesse, elegance and a perfume to all the wines that they produce. And it's easy to forget what pioneers the Guiberts actually were in this region back in the 70s. For instance, some of their founding principles have been to be organic, to be sustainable, and to encourage biodiversity. When they bought the estate, the old man who'd farmed it before then had never used any chemicals. He was an elderly man and the estate was very much overgrown, and a lot of it had to be reclaimed from amongst the garrigue scrub. The plots were cleared in such a way they tried not to cut down any trees, and today, as trees have grown up surrounding the vineyards, the family see benefits in terms of having trees next to the vineyard and in terms of the biodiversity that exists in this locality. It's also worth saying that when the Guiberts were sourcing planting material, they always tried to identify the best of what they were collecting. So for instance, it's noted that their Viognier was sourced from Condrieu producer Georges Vernet. Their Chardonnay vines came from the Comte Lafon estate, and the Chenin Blanc that they've planted was from the vineyards of Domaine Huet in Vouvray. So at each step they were seeking out the top producers of these regions for their advice and for their help. Now the blend of the white wine is, as I say, is predominantly Viognier. It's 31% of Viognier in here, with 23% of Petit Menceng, 13% of Chardonnay, 5% of Chenin, and as I say, the remaining 28% is made up of what they call rare varieties. So the two Muscats, Muscat d'Alexandre, Muscat Blanc et Petit Grain, Marsanne, Roussanne, Semillon, Viano, Gros Menceng, and Petit Corbu. Now when it came to harvest, these varieties were all picked by hand, and in fact they're all co-fermented. They all go into one large fermenter, but they undergo a period of 5 to 7 days of macération pelliculaire, so skin maceration, but in the presence of oxygen, and that helps to stabilise the wines. So once the juice has been pressed off the skins, fermentation took place in temperature-controlled stainless steel tanks. Following fermentation, the only aging that went on was a period of up to 4 months aging in stainless steel tanks. A portion of this wine used to spend some time aging in oak, but that's no longer the case. They felt that actually it closed up the fruit and didn't really benefit the wine in terms of its ageability. Now 2021 was a vintage where yields were actually quite low, largely because there was a cold winter that was followed by frosts in April. So in the first 16 days of April, the temperatures in the Gassac Valley dropped below -5 on several occasions. And that damaged the buds and reduced the crop significantly. So we actually see quite low yields for 2021, which has resulted in a wine with lovely concentrated fruit. So let's have a look at it, shall we? So the colours of medium intensity. It's a slightly strawish yellow, maybe a slight golden hint to it. The wine has 13.5% alcohol, and it's forming tears fairly readily on the side of the glass there. There's some nice viscosity there as I swirl it. There's some weight and richness to the wine. So let's see what we make of the aroma, shall we? The initial aromas are of sort of rich dried apricot, of orange peel, mandarin, that sort of lifted note. But there really is a note of the skin contact. It's making me think of dried apricot, maybe a touch of fig, a little bit of sultana, but there is that sort of juicy stone fruit note that's very much the fore. There's a grapey richness. And a lovely ripeness. So let's have a taste. On the palate, there's a lovely weight and richness. It's smooth, it's rounded. The texture is almost there's almost a marzipan note on the texture, which makes me think that there are vanilla touches in there from oak, but there isn't. That's all coming from the skin contact. And actually, perhaps by the finish, there's a tiny touch of sort of bitterness there, almost a sort of a candied peel note. There really is that sort of concentrated dried apricot, rich juicy nectarine, those sort of stone fruit and dried stone fruit notes, with this kind of overlying oranginess, and as I say, that sort of dried peel note as well by the finish. The acidity is giving a lovely freshness. I wouldn't say it was particularly high. It's not a particularly sharp mineral wine or anything like that, but there's just such a lovely intensity of this pure fruit, and I think that the weight of the fruit is perhaps slightly masking some of the freshness of the acidity. The flavours are lasting well, the alcohol's in balance, it really doesn't stand out at all at 13.5%, it's just in line there with the lovely rich fruit, which follows through nicely, sort of giving that sort of stone fruit, vanilla, marzipan note to the finish that lasts incredibly well. Now, looking at the Wine Searcher aggregated critic score on this vintage of this wine, it gets a 93. I think that's actually a very well deserved score. I think this is a wine whose intensity and richness would give it the option to age for sort of 7 or 8 years. These wines can become a little sort of sherried, and they gain secondary aromas if you age them for that long. So actually there's quite a good argument for drinking them young. But if you're happy with that sort of style, it's an interesting style of wine to age, and it will certainly gain lots of additional complexity. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you found the tasting of interest. If you've enjoyed it, do please press the like button. If you'd like to watch more of these tastings, it would be great if you'd sign up and subscribe to our channel. If you have any comments you'd like to leave, please pop those in the comments box below. It would be interesting to hear from you, to hear what you think about the wines, what you think about the tastings we're doing, or anything else that relates to them. I will of course leave a link in the notes to the Wine Searcher webpage for this vintage of this wine, so that you can follow that up. You can see where it's available, what its price is, and any of the other background information we have about this wine for you to look at. If you have any friends you think might like to watch the video, please feel free to pass it on to them. That would be fantastic. But most importantly, let's hope that you can find some time and come and join us for another tasting in the very near future, won't you? Thanks again. Bye for now.